Welcome to Affair Crimes Uncovered. Enjoy this true crime story.
In the quiet, tree-lined streets of Bronxville, New York, nestled just north of New York City, sits the prestigious Sarah Lawrence College. Known for its progressive education and artistic flair, it's the last place anyone would expect to become the epicenter of one of the most shocking and disturbing criminal cases in recent memory. But sometimes, evil finds its way into even the most unlikely of places. It begins in the fall of 2010, when a middle-aged man named Lawrence Ray, known to most as Larry, moved into his daughter Talia's dorm room on the Sarah Lawrence campus. At first glance, there was nothing particularly unusual about this. Parents often help their kids move in, after all. But Larry didn't leave after a day or two. He stayed, and stayed, and stayed. To understand how this could happen, we need to take a step back and look at who Larry Ray was. Born in Brooklyn, Ray had lived a life that seemed to straddle the line between fact and fiction. He claimed to have worked on Wall Street, to have connections with the CIA, and to have been involved in top-secret government operations. He painted himself as a man of mystery, of power, of influence. But the reality was far less glamorous. By the time he arrived at Sarah Lawrence, Ray had a criminal record. He'd been convicted of securities fraud and had violated his parole. He'd been involved in a messy custody battle with his ex-wife. He had a history of manipulating people, of spinning elaborate tales to draw them in. And now he had found his perfect hunting ground. Larry quickly ingratiated himself with Talia's roommates and friends. He cooked for them, bought them expensive meals, and engaged them in deep, philosophical conversations late into the night. To these young, impressionable students, Larry seemed worldly, wise, and caring. He positioned himself as a father figure, a mentor, someone who could guide them through the complexities of life. One of these students was Daniel Levin. Daniel was struggling with his sexuality and his place in the world. Larry seemed to offer understanding and acceptance. He told Daniel he could help him become the man he was meant to be. Another student, Santos Rosario, was battling depression. Larry promised he could cure him. Claudia Drury, another of Talia's friends, was dealing with body image issues. Larry said he could help her learn to love herself. Slowly but surely, Larry began to weave a web around these young people. He introduced them to what he called therapy sessions. Long, intense conversations where he would probe into their deepest fears and insecurities. He would stay up all night talking with them, wearing them down physically and emotionally. And all the while he was gathering information, learning their weaknesses, finding the cracks in their psyches that he could exploit. As the weeks turned into months, Larry's influence grew. He convinced several of the students to move off campus with him, first to an apartment in Manhattan and later to a property in North Carolina. He isolated them from their families and friends, telling them that their parents didn't understand them, that only he truly cared about their well-being. But caring was the last thing on Larry's mind. Once he had these young people under his control, the true horror began to unfold. Larry introduced a concept he called malicious intent. He convinced his followers that they had done terrible things to him and to each other, things they couldn't remember because they had repressed the memories. He would subject them to hours-long interrogations, wearing them down until they confessed to crimes they had never committed. One by one, Larry broke down their defenses. He convinced Santos that he had poisoned him with cyanide. He told Daniel that he was gay because he had been sexually abused as a child. He persuaded Claudia that she had damaged his property and owed him hundreds of thousands of dollars. And then came the abuse. Larry would force his followers to work long hours without pay, claiming they were working off their debts to him. He would deprive them of sleep, sometimes keeping them awake for days on end. He would restrict their diets, controlling what they ate and when. And he would subject them to physical abuse, beating them, choking them, even threatening them with knives and hammers. But perhaps the most horrifying aspect of Larry's abuse was the sexual exploitation. He forced several of his followers into prostitution, including Claudia Drury. Over the course of 4 years, Claudia was made to work as a prostitute 7 days a week, earning an estimated $2.5 million, all of which went directly to Larry. He would monitor her constantly, forcing her to keep detailed logs of her clients and her earnings. Throughout all of this, Larry maintained his grip on his followers through a combination of physical intimidation, emotional manipulation, and elaborate conspiracy theories. He convinced them that there were powerful forces out to get him, and by extension them. He told them that if they left, they would be in danger. He made them believe that he was the only one who could protect them. For years, this nightmare continued, hidden from the outside world. The students' families tried to intervene, but Larry had poisoned them against their parents. College officials were unaware of what was happening off campus, and the victims themselves were too terrified and brainwashed to seek help. But as with all secrets, the truth eventually came to light. In 2019, a bombshell article was published in New York Magazine's The Cut. Titled, "The Stolen Kids of Sarah Lawrence," it laid bare the horrifying details of Larry Ray's cult. The article, written by Ezra Marcus and James D. Walsh, was based on interviews with several of Larry's victims who had managed to break free from his influence. The story sent shockwaves through the Sarah Lawrence community and beyond. How could this have happened? How could a man move into a college dorm and essentially kidnap a group of students in plain sight? The publication of the article set off a chain of events that would finally bring Larry Ray to justice. The FBI launched an investigation, digging into the allegations made in the article. They interviewed victims, gathered evidence, and built a case against Ray. In February 2020, Larry Ray was arrested at his home in New Jersey. The indictment against him was damning. He was charged with sex trafficking, extortion, forced labor, and money laundering, among other crimes. The U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, Jeffrey Berman, did not mince words when describing Ray's actions. Ray used physical, sexual, and psychological abuse to induce young adults to provide him and his co-conspirators with millions of dollars in benefits, Berman said. As the case moved towards trial, more details emerged about the extent of Larry's crimes. Prosecutors revealed that he had recorded many of his therapy sessions, creating a vast archive of his abuse. These recordings would prove to be crucial evidence in the trial. The trial began in March 2022 and lasted for 4 weeks. It was a grueling process for the victims, who had to relive their trauma on the witness stand. They described in harrowing detail the abuse they had suffered at Larry's hands. Claudia Drury testified about being forced into prostitution. Daniel Levin recounted how Larry had once tied him to a chair and placed a plastic bag over his head. Santos Rosario described how Larry had convinced him he was responsible for damaging Ray's property, leading Santos to contemplate suicide. Throughout the trial, Larry Ray maintained his innocence. His defense team tried to paint him as a victim himself, claiming that he suffered from mental illness and had been persecuted by corrupt law enforcement officials. But the evidence against him was overwhelming. On April 6, 2022, after deliberating for less than a day, the jury returned its verdict. Larry Ray was found guilty on all 15 counts against him. The courtroom erupted in tears and sighs of relief as the verdict was read. For the victims, it was the culmination of years of pain and struggle, a moment of vindication and justice. U.S. Attorney Damian Williams summed up the case in stark terms. "Let me be very clear. Larry Ray is a predator, an evil man who did evil things. Today's verdict finally brings him to justice." But the story doesn't end with the verdict. The impact of Larry Ray's crimes continues to reverberate through the lives of his victims and the Sarah Lawrence community. In January 2023, Larry Ray was sentenced to 60 years in prison. At the sentencing hearing, his victims had the opportunity to address him directly, to tell him how his actions had affected their lives. Daniel Levin spoke of the years of therapy he had undergone to overcome the trauma of Ray's abuse. "Lawrence Ray broke me," he said. "He convinced me that I was worthless, that I had no future. It's taken years for me to rebuild my life, to learn to trust again." Claudia Drury's statement was read by her lawyer. In it, she described the lasting impact of being forced into prostitution. "Every day, I wake up and have to face the reality of what happened to me," she wrote. "The shame, the fear, the self-doubt, they never fully go away." Santos Rosario spoke of the toll Ray's abuse had taken on his family. Two of Santos's sisters, Felicia and Yalitza, had also fallen under Ray's influence. "He didn't just hurt me," Santos said. "He tore my family apart. We're still trying to put the pieces back together." As he handed down the sentence, Judge Louis J. Lyman didn't hold back in his condemnation of Ray's actions. "Mr. Ray," he said, "you used your victim's humanity as a vulnerability. The harm you inflicted was deliberate, extended, and heinous." The 60-year sentence effectively ensures that Larry Ray will spend the rest of his life behind bars. But for his victims, the journey of healing is far from over. In the wake of the trial, many have questioned how something like this could have happened at a place like Sarah Lawrence College. How could a man move into a dorm room and manipulate students for years without anyone noticing? Sarah Lawrence College has faced criticism for its handling of the situation. In November 2023, 2 former students filed a lawsuit against the college, alleging that it had failed to protect them from Ray. The lawsuit claims that the college ignored warning signs and failed to properly investigate concerns raised by parents. For its part, Sarah Lawrence has expressed sympathy for Ray's victims and stated that it cooperated fully with the investigation. The college has also said that it has reviewed and strengthened its policies regarding campus safety and student well-being. But the case has raised broader questions about vulnerability and manipulation on college campuses. Experts in cult psychology have pointed out that college students, away from home for the first time and searching for identity and meaning, can be particularly susceptible to manipulation. Dr. John Jalalich, a sociologist and cult expert, commented on the case. "What Larry Ray did is a textbook example of how cults operate. He targeted vulnerable young people, isolated them from their support systems, and gradually broke down their sense of self. It's a reminder of how important it is for colleges to be vigilant and for students to be aware of the signs of manipulation and abuse." The Sarah Lawrence case has also shed light on the long-term effects of cult involvement and psychological abuse. Many of Ray's victims have spoken about the ongoing struggle to rebuild their lives and heal from their trauma. Isabella Pollock, one of Ray's followers who was initially so devoted to him that she helped him control the others, eventually pleaded guilty to a money laundering conspiracy charge. Her case highlights the complex dynamics of cult involvement, where victims can sometimes become perpetrators themselves. The story of the Sarah Lawrence sex cult has captured public attention, spawning numerous articles, podcasts, and documentaries. In February 2023, Hulu released a 3-part docuseries titled Stolen Youth: Inside the Cult at Sarah Lawrence, featuring interviews with several of Ray's victims. The series provided a harrowing look into the inner workings of Ray's cult, including audio and video recordings made by Ray himself. It showed in stark detail how a charismatic manipulator could take control of young people's lives, exploiting their vulnerabilities and dreams for his own gain. But beyond the sensational aspects of the case, the Sarah Lawrence story serves as a sobering reminder of the darkness that can lurk beneath the surface of even the most seemingly idyllic places. Bronxville, with its tree-lined streets and prestigious college, seems an unlikely setting for such a disturbing crime. But that's precisely what made it the perfect hunting ground for someone like Larry Ray. In a place where everyone felt safe, where parents sent their children to grow and learn, a predator found fertile ground. The case has forced the Bronxville community, and indeed communities across the country, to confront uncomfortable truths. It has sparked conversations about safety, about trust, about the responsibilities of institutions to protect the young people in their care. For the victims, the road ahead is long. Many are still in therapy, still working to overcome the trauma of their experiences. Some have spoken about the difficulty of forming relationships, of trusting others, of believing in themselves again after years of manipulation and abuse. But there is hope too. Many of Ray's victims have shown remarkable resilience. They've returned to school, started careers, begun to rebuild their lives. Their courage in coming forward, in facing their abuser in court, has been widely praised. As for Larry Ray, he will likely spend the rest of his life in prison, his reign of terror finally at an end. But the ripple effects of his crimes continue to spread, touching lives far beyond the small circle of students he initially targeted. The Sarah Lawrence sex cult case serves as a stark reminder of the power of manipulation, the vulnerability of young people, and the importance of vigilance. It's a story of darkness, yes, but also one of survival, of justice, and ultimately of hope. In the quiet town of Bronxville, life goes on. Students still flock to Sarah Lawrence College, still dreaming of bright futures. But now perhaps with a bit more caution, a bit more awareness. And for those who live through the nightmare of Larry Ray's cult, each day brings new challenges, new opportunities for healing, and new chances to reclaim the lives that were so nearly stolen from them. As we reflect on this disturbing chapter in Bronxville's history, we're left with important questions. How do we protect the vulnerable without stifling independence? How do we foster trust while remaining vigilant? And how do we ensure that the Larry Rays of the world never again find such fertile ground for their manipulations? These are questions without easy answers. But by confronting them, by refusing to look away from the darkness that can exist even in the most unexpected places, we take the first steps toward creating a safer world for all. The story of the Sarah Lawrence sex cult is more than just a sensational crime tale. It's a cautionary tale, a call to action, and a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. It reminds us that evil can wear a friendly face, that manipulation can masquerade as mentorship, and that sometimes the greatest dangers are the ones we invite into our lives. But it also reminds us of the power of truth, of the importance of community, and of the strength that can be found in standing up to abuse. The young people who survived Larry Ray's cult have shown incredible courage. They've reclaimed their voices, shared their stories, and in doing so, they've shed light on a darkness that thrived in secrecy. As the town of Bronxville and the Sarah Lawrence community continue to grapple with the aftermath of this case, there's a sense of both sorrow and determination. Sorrow for what was lost, for the innocence shattered, for the trust betrayed, but also determination. Determination to learn, to heal, to prevent such a thing from ever happening again. In the end, the story of the Sarah Lawrence sex cult is a reminder of the complexity of human nature, of the capacity for both great evil and great resilience. It's a story that will be told and retold, studied and analyzed for years to come. And with each telling, perhaps we'll come a little closer to understanding, to healing, and to creating a world where such stories become relics of the past rather than headlines of the present. For now, in Bronxville, in Sarah Lawrence, and in communities across the country, the conversation continues, the healing continues, and the hope that from this darkness some light might emerge. That hope continues too, undiminished and undefeated.